When it comes to entry-level small SUVs, ground clearance aside, we don't really expect too much out of them. I mean, yes, sure, they are pretty affordable in price and they still kind of look like SUVs, but features-wise, there's really not much to them. However, Kia has finally come up with a car that will probably change that notion. This is the 2024 Kia Sonet in the top-of-the-line SX trim. In this video, let's see what this car has to offer and what features it has, and if they are pretty impressive for its price. So let's first explore the exterior of the Kia Sonet. Being the top-of-the-line SX, you will expect all the bells and whistles right here. And unlike a lot of these mini SUVs, Kia actually took the time to give you pretty decent amounts of styling right here, which looks pretty good. You'll notice a lot of textures, lines, and curves to it. This hood has two of these like detents on either side. You have the nice new Kia logo. And I also like how you have a very sporty like blacked out grille that contrasts well with this silver accent. It's also not that flat over here at the front, so there is an offset between the grille area as well as the bumper. So yeah, that really does give it extra zing right there. Being the top of the line SX2, you do get LED headlamps with DRLs, and on the side of the Kia Sonet, you'll also see just how short this vehicle is. So size-wise, this should go up against the likes of the Toyota Raize. But ground clearance-wise, you have 205 millimeters of ground clearance, so that's not bad. And the rims too, they look pretty good. So you have a textured look to it, two-tone too, and they come 16 inches in size. Now, before we talk about the rear of the Kia Sonet, I do want to point out that if you look here on top, there is a shark's fin antenna and roof rails too, but it clearly says right here, do not load. So these roof rails, they're only for aesthetics. You're not supposed to put anything on them. Anyway, here at the back now, you do have this very nice like small spoiler on top. However, if I said that the front looks pretty good with its textured look and all those offset between the grille and the bumper, for example, this entire rear end kind of just looks flat. It just goes straight down, which isn't very modern looking in my opinion. But at least Kia did save it with this nice light bar that runs across the entire rear. Now let's open up this tailgate, and it is pretty light, so it doesn't really need to be power operated. And in here, you have a pretty decent amount of space to carry some items in case this is still not enough. Yes, those rear seats can be folded down 60/40. While it doesn't fold flat, it still expands your storage space by a lot, so that's good. Now, if you open up this false floor too, you will reveal a full-size spare tire, which is truly surprising. Now for the powertrain, a lot of the cars in this class would probably go for a 1.2 liter or a 1 liter with a turbo, right? But for this one, you have a 1.5 liter naturally aspirated gasoline engine, giving you a pretty respectable 115 horsepower and 144 newton meters of torque. But this is now paired to an IVT, basically Hyundai and the Kia Group's version of a CVT, which honestly is so much better, but you'll see that in the driving segment later on. Now, for fuel economy, in the city, it's not exactly great for the size of this vehicle. You're only going to return around 6.9 kilometers per liter, but this is with pretty heavy city traffic. But on the highway, it gets pretty impressive at 19.6 kilometers per liter. Now we move inside the Kia Sonet. First, we check the door thud, and it's just about okay. It's a little bit better compared to a lot of the cars in this class, but it's not particularly great. The interior of this car, unsurprisingly, is covered in a lot of affordable materials, and I'm talking about the dashboard right here with its hard-touch plastic, including the sides of the doors. However, what you will kind of like right here is that if you know the Hyundai Stargazer X, for example, it has a very similar dashboard layout wherein you have this border in piano black that does surround your dual 10.25-inch screens, one for your digital instrument cluster and one for your center touchscreen. This center touchscreen tool comes with Apple CarPlay, which is wireless, and Android Auto, which unfortunately isn't wireless, but it is pretty responsive, pretty easy to use too. And if you put the car into reverse, it even does come with a reverse camera with swiveling lines. The clarity of it isn't too bad too for this car's class. Now, you do get a single zone climate control right here. You do even get a wireless charging pad. You get two USB ports, one USB-A and one USB-C, and the rest of this is pretty straightforward because you just have a regular shifter. It does come with a sport mode though, and you also have a regular handbrake. Now let's move on over towards the steering wheel, and it is covered in nice supple feeling leather. Unfortunately, you can only tilt the steering column, but you cannot telescope it. But just in case you can't reach it, well, don't worry, because the seats, they do have lots of adjustments to them. And while they're only manually adjustable, at least you can adjust the height, which you can't do in some of the cars in this class. The leather on the seats too, and the cushioning, they aren't too bad. So even if you do take this car out for longer journeys, it would be pretty decently comfortable. Now on top, you do have this sunroof, and while it's not panoramic, it is more than big enough for the size of this vehicle. And in terms of advanced driver assistance systems, you get lane departure warning, you get lane keeping assist, forward collision avoidance assist, and even a driver attention warning. Unfortunately though, when it comes to airbags, even though this is a top spec model, you only have 2 airbags, and they're only right here for the front passengers. Now we move on over towards the rear seats of the Kia Sonet, and as usual, we check the door first. So that does sound pretty good. A lot better than the front, honestly. So back here, space does come at a premium, but it really isn't too bad if you're about my height. But I'm only 5'6" tall though, so if you're probably like 5'9" or so seated behind yourself, you will start to struggle back here. Now in terms of headroom too, the same is true, because I only have around 4 or 5 inches of headroom right here. So again, if you're a little bit on the taller side, this isn't exactly the best place to be. However, what is nice though is that these rear seats, they are pretty tall, so you don't feel cramped in terms of bending your legs back here. And what I like back here too is there are these soft touch materials on the side, but they are minimal, still pretty good for its class. And you even have your very own 2 air vents at the back. You even have this small quarter panel for extra light, and you even have 2 USB-C ports. Now, other things you get back here include this center armrest with 2 cup holders, and in case you do have to seat a third passenger right here, I think it is more than doable for shorter trips, because the transmission tunnel, it isn't too wide and it isn't too high, so there is space for you to put your feet, but it wouldn't be the most comfortable for longer journeys because the car isn't too wide. Now we drive the Kia Sonet SX, and driving this vehicle feels relatively comfortable, at least for a car of its class. If you compare this to a lot of its competitors like the Toyota Raize, for example, and even the Geely GX3 Pro, this just gives you a lot of comfort. It deals with bumps really well. The ride isn't too choppy, and when you do take this up over to highway speeds, even if you're going at like 100 or so, it is still decently quiet in here. Wind noise and tire noise are well subdued. I mean, don't expect luxury car standards, but for a mini SUV of this segment, it truly is pretty good. Same goes with power though, and 115 horsepower isn't really much, and yes, I do feel that while it is adequate, the car does feel a little bit heavy. It doesn't really want to rev up too much. However, there is a quick fix to that. So if you simply move the gear selector right here to the left, which turns on your sport mode, you instantly feel that throttle response tightens up a lot, and it feels just so much lighter. It's like the Kia Sonet just lost half of its weight, and now it is a decent accelerating vehicle. Again, it's not the fastest car in the world, but for its size, 115 horsepower and 144 newton meters of torque definitely isn't bad already. Also, what isn't bad with this vehicle is the steering, because a lot of the cars in this class, they're really tuned for undynamic driving. But for this one, you have a decent amount of steering feedback, you have a decent amount of weight to the steering to it, so it gives you a sense of confidence over corners. And same goes for its suspension setup. While I said that it deals with bumps pretty well and it's definitely on the comfortable side of things, it isn't exactly the wallowiest. So yes, it can handle corners decently too. I think that's what I really like to describe this car as. It's a very decent vehicle overall, and for its class, it's truly a good car. Also, the transmission that Kia used in this one, the IVT, yes, it still is a CVT in the very definition of a continuously variable transmission, but because it's this supposed intelligent version of it, and I have in fact tested it out on the Hyundai models as well, in the Stargazer as well as the Creta, I can really report that it is one of the best CVTs out there. It doesn't really rubber band, it doesn't really groan, it knows in which part of the RPM to put you in. While it doesn't feel like an automatic transmission, it doesn't feel annoying. It doesn't feel like this econo box that they placed to save you a lot of fuel. It still feels decently engaging too. The Kia Sonet, therefore, is not a bad car at all. In fact, it is truly pretty good for its class. It's pretty comfortable. It has all those features such as your advanced driver assistance systems, and while it doesn't have adaptive cruise control, it does have that lane departure warning and that lane keeping assist, which truly is pretty impressive. It's also pretty comfortable too for its class, both in terms of ride comfort and even wind noise and tire noise. So the question is, how much does this car now cost? Well, you can get this Kia Sonet in this top-of-line SX trim for only 1,158,000 pesos. And I think that at that price, you're getting so much of a car in its class, and this might just be one of the best cars in its class.